I've seen a lot in this life. Bodies crushed in wreckage, families destroyed by a split-second mistake. But nothing prepared me for what I experienced that morning. Nothing prepared me for, shall I still wake up in a cold sweat sometimes? And the worst part isn't even the nightmare. It's the silence that follows. A heavy, dense silence, as if even the air around me remembers it. I've tried to rationalize, to seek explanations. I've spoken to colleagues, consulted old reports. But there are things that don't fit in a police report. There are calls for help that come too late or from where they shouldn't come. There are nights I stare at the patrol car radio, waiting for it to crackle with that voice again. That damned voice. Too soft for someone who had died. My heart races just remembering the smell of rain pounding the old asphalt. The fog creeping along the curves of the road as if searching for something. That night, it felt like time was suspended, as if something were about to repeat itself, or had never ended. It's been 6 years, but sometimes I feel like I'm still there, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, my breath held, and my eyes fixed on that curve so many avoid, but that she chose to find me. The memory comes like a dull thud in my chest, and before I know it, I'm back there, again on that quiet patrol. At the exact moment the radio crackled and her voice called for help. If you've come this far, it's because you carry within you the same thirst for mysteries that still have no answers. You're not like others. You listen carefully, feel the chills, and seek what's hidden between the lines. This story is not just mine. It is Nawur. Here, each story is a door to the inexplicable. If you love stories that make you think twice before turning out the light, if your heart races with every unexpected twist, then you're in the right place. Be part of this community that's not afraid to hear what no one else dares to say. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and come with me to discover the secrets that still lie in wait. Have you ever pretended everything was fine, while inside, something inside you broke every time the patrol car radio crackled? I have. The truth is, no one joins the highway patrol prepared for what they'll see. We join thinking we'll save lives, that we'll make a difference. I believed that myself, but over time, what remains is the weight. The weight of sirens blaring late at night, the metallic taste in your mouth, the cold sweat that starts before you even arrive at the scene, and then the silence. A silence that clings to your soul and never lets go. The problem is, when you see tragedy every day, it starts to seem normal. I saw twisted bodies trapped in irons, families torn apart by a single crash, entire dreams scattered on the asphalt like garbage. And the worst part wasn't what you saw, but what remained. That feeling that no matter how hard you run, you'll never make it in time. That even when you do everything right, someone still dies. That you're not a hero. You're just the first to see the destruction. Over the years I became cold. Not by choice, but by necessity, because if you felt everything every time, I wouldn't last a week. I began memorizing the procedures like a robot. I'd arrive, cordon off the area, call emergency services, fill out the report, and avoid eye contact with those who stayed behind. I was afraid to see the reflection of my own pain there. Because yes, I carried mine. I lost someone I loved, someone who didn't deserve to die that way. And what destroyed me wasn't the accident itself. It was the fact that it happened on a curve I knew. A damn curve I'd signaled dozens of times. I'd warned her, requested improvements, sent a report, but no one did anything until she died. And then they did. Too late. The curve took her, and took something of me with it. Since that day, I've never been the same. After that, everything felt personal. Every occurrence was a repeat of what I'd experienced. Every sudden stop, every tire mark on the road, every muffled scream. It was like going back in time. And yet, I was still there, working shifts, day after day, because I didn't know how to do anything else. Because in some strange way, I felt like I owed something to that road, as if I were trying to repay a debt that never ended. My colleagues noticed I was different, quieter, more dry. I never talked about my life outside. Of work, I never smiled at jokes. I always had a distant look in my eyes, as if I were listening to something the others weren't. And in a way I was, because after that accident, I started to understand things. Small, at first. Details. A feeling of déjà vu in certain parts. A chill that didn't come from time. Muffled sounds when everything should have been silent. It was as if the road had kept a part of itself there, or as if something of it was still trying to tell me something. But I never talked about it. How could I? I was the skeptical cop, the guy who said, "It's all in my head," when the rookies came with stories of figures in the woods or noises coming from the dead bend. I was the one who said, "It's exhaustion, go rest." And on the outside I maintained my composure, but inside, I trembled. Because deep down I heard it too, and maybe out of cowardice or respect or desperation I pretended otherwise. I started avoiding certain stretches whenever I could. I volunteered for other stops, switched shifts and claimed back pain, but it wasn't always possible. Sometimes fate takes you exactly where you don't want to be, and every time I had to go around that curve, the air changed. I swear on everything I have, the air grew denser, heavier. Sound seemed to recede as if the road itself were holding its breath, and I, without understanding why, did the same. There were days when, parked there in my car, I was certain that if I opened the door and got out, she'd be there. Not alive, not really, but present, as if death had left an echo, a trail, a shadow only I could see. No one had ever seen me cry. But there, in that stretch, I cried. With my head down, hands on the steering wheel, no sound, no gesture, just the salt dripping from my eyes as the radio hissed and pretended I was on duty. I became someone who knew too much about pain and too little about moving forward. I was afraid to sleep and dream about what I saw. I was afraid to wake up and realize nothing had changed. I was afraid that everything I'd done up until that point hadn't saved anyone, not even myself. And yet, I kept going, because sometimes moving on isn't courage. It's stubbornness. It's not knowing how to stop. Until one day, a woman appeared on that bend, alone, wearing a white dress, her face covered by her hair. She looked lost. She looked hurt. She asked for help in the quietest voice I'd ever heard, and something inside me froze. Some nights are deceptive. They arrive like any other, dressed in normality, disguised as routine, but carrying beneath the surface a kind of silence you only understand later, an absence of noise that isn't tranquility. It's a sign. The early morning hours when it all began were nothing special. The shift was too calm, the road wet from the earlier rain, and the radio completely silent. I was tired, yes, but no more than usual. But there was something about that night, something I couldn't explain, but that, from the start, made me uneasy. The kind of discomfort that starts in the stomach and spreads slowly, as if preparing you for something. I glanced at the police car clock. 2:11. A miserable time. That dead hour when your body is already tired, your mind scattered, and time seems to drag on, just to remind you that there's still a long way to go until dawn. I considered stopping at a familiar spot for a lukewarm coffee and a cigarette, leaning against the police car door, but something made me keep driving. An unreasonable impulse, an unnamed anxiety. I continued down the road at low speed, my eyes scanning both sides as always, the sound of tires on asphalt the only thing filling the space. Then the radio crackled. It wasn't a transmission. It was just a dry, short hiss, as if someone were trying to tune in to the wrong frequency. But there, in all the stillness, it sounded too loud. I grabbed the radio's microphone and pressed the answer button. No response. Nothing. No sign of interference. The panel didn't indicate an active call. Still the hiss came again, and with it a voice, female, faint, almost a whisper piercing the static. "Is anyone there? Help me." The sound was swallowed up the instant it appeared. The radio went silent again, as if nothing had happened. That voice didn't sound panicked. It wasn't the urgency of someone who's just crashed and is in shock. It was an almost calm plea. Sad, like someone who's called for help before and never been heard. And that shook me in a way I can't explain. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel. The engine roared softly. I kept driving, more alert now, feeling that thin shiver run down my spine. The road was starting to descend into a familiar curve, one I avoided when I could. One of those with a history of tragedy. One of those that hides too much hidden under the brush. And it was then, right at the corner of the curve, that I saw it. A silhouette standing on the side of the road. A woman. A light-colored dress. Wet. Her head was slightly tilted, as if observing something on the ground. The police car slowed down on its own, or maybe it was me, without realizing it. The headlights illuminated it completely, and I stopped a few meters away. I got out. The early morning breeze hit my face, cold, carrying that smell of damp earth mixed with something more metallic, old blood. I took a deep breath. The radio on my shoulder hissed again, but this time I said nothing. I didn't touch anything. I just walked. "Ma'am, are you okay?" My voice was low, careful. She didn't respond. She didn't even move. Her back was to me. The flashlight trembled in my hand, but not from fear. It was something else. A built-up tension, as if my body itself knew it was about to cross an invisible line. I took another step. The ground was slippery, and the crushed grass indicated someone had passed this way before. Her voice returned, but not from her lips. It came from the radio. "You passed me." There was no emotion in that sentence. It was just a statement, something old, rehearsed, as if repeated many times before. She turned her head slowly. Her eyes were dark, sunken, and her face was wet, not just from the rain. There was dirt on her skin, and marks that looked older than that night, marks that shouldn't have been there. I asked if she needed help, if she'd been in an accident. She responded with another question. "Can you help me find my phone?" She pointed toward the bend. The gesture was slow, as if made by someone very tired. I followed the direction of her finger. The flashlight revealed, further ahead, metal debris buried in the ravine. Nothing recent. A piece of bumper, some shards of glass, rust on the sides. I walked over. The silence was broken only by the sound of my own footsteps and my racing heart. There was something buried there, part of an old car, maybe. I knelt down, used the flashlight to look for details, and then I saw it. Among the twisted parts, hanging from a rusty wire, was a necklace, a circular pendant engraved with a name I knew. I swallowed hard. I stood up suddenly. I looked back. The woman was gone. I ran back to where I'd last seen her. Nothing. No footprints. No sound. Only the police car's headlights still on, illuminating the empty space. The radio was off. I clearly remembered turning it off. And yet, the voice had come from there. My hand was shaking. The pendant was still with me. And I felt, with every fiber of my being, that this was no coincidence. This was personal, and it was old. And maybe I was just getting started. And in that moment, standing between the necklace, the bushes, and the pre-dawn darkness, I realized something had pulled me back. Something unresolved. Something that might never have gone away. And the question came involuntarily, sinking like a stone into my mind. What if she had never left here? I stood still for an unfathomable amount of time. I no longer looked at my watch. Didn't think about the shift or protocol. I just felt. The pendant was still in my hand, cold, damp, dirty. The name engraved there hurt more than any cut. I can't say how that object ended up there, or why it was whole, clean, among such ancient debris. It made no sense. But nothing from that early morning did. Nothing since that voice on the radio, since that still presence on the curve, since that unblinking gaze that pierced everything I believed in. I slowly climbed the side of the ravine and returned to the road. The police car was where I'd left it, engine running, headlights bathing the brush in pale white. I looked around once more. No movement, no lights from approaching cars, no sound of footsteps, animals, or wind. It was as if the world had frozen around me, leaving only me and the memory of what had just happened. I entered the car carefully, as if trespassing on sacred ground. I sat down, closing the door with a sharp click that made me shiver. I took a deep breath, and the radio hissed again. This time no voice, just that harsh, irregular sound like static mixed with electrical interference. But it persisted, even with it turned off, with no light on the dashboard, no button pressed. The sound spread as if it were coming from inside the car itself. I picked up the communicator with trembling hands. The air inside was suffocating. I touched the radio button one last time, just to be sure, and that's when I heard it again. Low, like a whisper in my ear, not through the speaker, but as if it were inside my head. She said, "Please help me, I can't get out of here." I froze. This wasn't another accident. It wasn't a tired hallucination. It wasn't pirate radio interfering. This was a request, a real request, coming from a place I didn't understand. And in some way I still can't explain. I knew she was talking to me. Only me. As if she already knew I was the only one who would listen. Or the only one who should listen. I stood still. The voice didn't repeat itself. The radio went silent. But her presence remained, as if now she'd entered the police car. I could smell it. I can't quite explain it. It was like wet jasmine mixed with something drier, like flowers in an ancient cemetery. It was delicate, almost imperceptible, but it was real. It wasn't in my head. Looking out the windshield, everything seemed the same. The road there, quiet, curved ahead. But I felt something invisible in front of me. Something waiting for an answer. And that's where the hardest part comes in. I wanted to respond. I wanted to help, not out of duty, not out of a uniform, but because of something beyond me, something that came from within me, like a forgotten guilt, like a debt never paid. And maybe that was it. Her voice struck a chord with me. There was something familiar in that tone, something I didn't want to admit, but recognized. As if I'd heard that phrase before, and the idea that someone or something was trapped there, on that curve, unable to leave, moved me in a way no other occurrence ever had, because it wasn't just her request, it was what it represented. It was what it said about me. I'd always been skeptical. I always laughed when people talked about lost souls on the road, about figures in the fog, about voices coming from the woods. I'd always dismissed them as sleepy trucker stories. But now, there in the middle of the night, with the radio off and the necklace in my hand, I couldn't laugh anymore. Because I was hearing it, I had seen it, and I knew it was real. The question wasn't whether it could happen. The question was, what would I do about it? She asked for help. And I stood there paralyzed, my heart in my throat, trying to understand what exactly she wanted. And more than that, why me? Why now? Why after so much time, so many years, so many accidents? Why was it me? Was it because of everything I ignored? The times I pretended I didn't see, didn't hear, didn't feel? Was it because I needed help, too, but never asked? The truth is, that request stirred something I'd hidden even from myself, because she wasn't the only one stuck there. I was too, stuck on that road, in that routine, in that unresolved grief. And maybe, just maybe, she knew it. Maybe she was offering me the chance to free us both. But how? And why? In that place? What if helping meant seeing something I wasn't ready to see? What if, deep down, that woman wasn't just asking for help getting out of the curve, but to take me with her? Have you ever been afraid that the cry for help wasn't to save someone, but to drag you along? I stayed inside the police car for an indescribable amount of time. The engine was running, the headlights shining brightly into the darkness, as if trying to protect something that had already been broken. The radio was silent. The necklace was still in my hand, and there was silence. Not the usual early morning silence, but a kind of emptiness that pressed against my chest, weighing more heavily than the noise, as if everything around me was waiting for my decision, as if time itself had stopped, watching to see if I would muster the courage. Help me, I can't get out of here. That phrase still echoed within me, and I no longer knew if I had truly heard it or if it had already become part of my own thoughts. It was as if her voice had mingled with my guilt, my traumas, the things I had kept bottled up and never digested, because in that moment it no longer mattered, whether it was real, supernatural, or delusional. What mattered was that there was something there, something asking, no begging, for an answer. My logical mind screamed. The part of me that wore a uniform, that wrote reports, that said it was just another accident, tried to maintain control. It said it was just stress, that I needed to sleep, that the radio was malfunctioning. But my body had already made up its mind. I knew it by the tightness in my stomach, the chills that crept up, the back of my neck without any wind, the pulse in my temples. I knew with every inch of my skin that I had to go back, that I could no longer pretend it hadn't happened. The key was still in the ignition. I turned it, turning off the engine. The silence became complete. I got out of the car. The night seemed denser, as if it were watching me. The headlights were off, giving everything a bluish, almost ghostly hue. The curve just ahead called to me again, but this time in a different way. Not as a threat, but as a confession waiting to be heard. I knew no one else would answer that call. That voice was for me, only me. My steps were slow, as if I didn't want to make a sound, as if any sound would break the spell of dawn. I descended to the spot where the woman had been minutes before. Nothing. The grass seemed taller, as if it had grown just to hide something. I cautiously passed the flashlight around, and each beam of light revealed shadows dancing where they shouldn't. My heart was pounding so loudly it drowned out my own thoughts. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what to look for. I only knew I needed to be there, that there was something unfinished, something she wanted to show, maybe a body, an object, a story, maybe herself. And it was in this void of certainties that I realized how much I, too, was stuck on that road. That everything I tried to ignore, the pain, the trauma, the anger, still pulled me back, as if my life had stopped there on that very stretch, years ago, and I had never left. I walked slowly along the side of the road again, my eyes scanning every detail. The air seemed still, but something in it had changed, a smell, a density. It was as if it were about to rain, but without a cloud in the sky. And then, out of nowhere, the sensation, someone behind me. Not a fright, but that subtle presence that makes no sound, that doesn't move, that just is. I turned quickly, but there was no one there, just the darkness and the muffled sound of breathing. And yet I knew she was there, watching, waiting, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of it. I felt a strange sense of responsibility, as if she'd finally understood. She didn't need a police officer. She needed a witness, someone who would see what was left, who would give voice to what was silenced, who would look at what the road tried to hide for so long. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. It wasn't about curiosity anymore, nor about delirium. It was about repair, about accepting that there are cries for help that don't come with sirens or urgency. Some come in silence, in the early morning, with the scent of wet flowers and eyes that never rest. I took another step, and another, and another. And with each step I felt myself moving away from the real world, from logic, from the uniform. It was just me, and her, and the curve. And when I reached the exact spot where the vegetation parted, as if opening to welcome me, I stopped. I took a deep breath. I closed my eyes, and I said for the first time out loud, "I am here." And in that instant, something responded. Would you follow it, even without knowing where it would lead? When I said I was there, truly, something in the room seemed to shift. It wasn't noise, it wasn't movement, it was something more subtle, an almost imperceptible shift in the air, as if time had been suspended by an invisible thread, as if everything around me had been waiting for this moment for a long time. I stood still, with my flashlight off, trying to listen. Not the sound of the brush nor the road, trying to hear something that wasn't coming from outside, something inside me. And that's when I realized the silence was complete, absolute. No insects, no wind, no distant engine sound, nothing. And then, for the first time that night, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't see it. Not yet. What came first was a presence, a slight pressure in the air, as if someone very close were behind me, breathing slowly. I turned carefully, nothing, just the darkness of the vegetation and the subtle glow of the police car parked behind. But my entire body reacted as if surrounded. The hairs on my arms stood on end. My hands were sweating, even in the cold. My heart, which had been pounding before, now beat slowly, as if it were holding its breath along with me. And then I saw her. She was exactly where no one should have been, a meter in front of me. It didn't startle me, nor did it shock me. It was as if she'd always been there, and only now could my eyes see her. The moonlight reflected off her dress, but there was no shine. It was a dead white. The edges of the fabric were still dirty with mud. Her hair was lank, stuck to her face. But there was something strange. She didn't seem part of the environment. She was like a superimposed image, blending in and out at the same time. And yet, she was real. She was more real than anything around her. She looked at me as she had before, not with supplication, but with an old pain, a tired pain. Her eyes were deep, too deep, as if they carried the memory of something that never ended. I tried to speak, but my throat closed. And then, without moving her lips, she said, or maybe she made me hear it inside my mind, "I was not seen, I was not found, I was not buried." It was like being punched in the gut. It wasn't just a lament, it was a denunciation, a scream held back for years, and I understood, not immediately, but I felt it. She had died there invisibly, forgotten, buried not only in the ground, but in silence. Maybe as a passenger, maybe as someone no one sought, maybe as someone who only now, only through me, was coming back into existence. The images began to come, not as my own memories, but as fragments I couldn't quite place. Heavy rain, a car skidding, the dull thud of impact, and a body, hers, trapped, crushed, staring out the broken window as the rainwater mixed blood and mud. She didn't scream, she just waited for someone to see, for someone to notice her, but no one came. And so she stayed. There. I fell to my knees without realizing it. The weight of that revelation broke me inside, because everything made sense now. The necklace, the radio, the call. She didn't just want help, she wanted to be found. She wanted to be remembered. She wanted someone to say, "I saw you," because no one ever did. And I, who had passed that curve so many times, who pretended not to feel the shiver, who ignored the signs, I had failed, as a police officer, as a man, as a human being. And that's what hurt the most. Not her presence, but the absence of everyone else, the collective inaction, the rush to cover their tracks, to move on, as if she were just another statistic, except she wasn't. She was someone. She had a name, a voice, an unjust end no one wanted to see. She approached, slowly. Her feet made no sound. She wasn't floating. She walked like any other, in person. But the air around her seemed to vibrate, as if it were being cut by something that shouldn't be there anymore. She stopped a few steps away from me, and she held out her hand. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I took it. The touch was cold. but not as icy as death. It was as cold as an old longing, as a forgotten truth. And in that instant I felt everything. I felt the car tipping over. I felt my body trapped. I felt her fear, her abandonment, her loneliness, as if she had allowed me to live for seconds what she had lived for hours, as if to say, "Now you know." And indeed I did. The weight of her request was not to save, it was to acknowledge. And when I let go of her hand, she smiled, for the first time. And in that smile there was gratitude, but also pain, because the story wasn't over yet. There was still something she hadn't shown me. There was still more. And before I could ask anything, she was gone, as if it had never been there. But the smell of wet flowers, remained. I walked back to the police car slowly, like someone walking in a world they no longer recognize. My body still felt like mine, but something inside was no longer the same. The curve was behind me, but it felt glued to me, as if it were under my skin or worse, inside my head. I got in the car, closed the door, and for the first time in years, I felt like crying. But I didn't. I couldn't. It was as if even the tears were afraid to come out. The radio remained silent. I didn't try to turn it on again. The dashboard glowed as always, but now that digital sound seemed false, as if it belonged to a world I no longer belonged to. I started the engine and stood there, my hand on the steering wheel, motionless, just breathing, or trying to, because the air felt thin, too dense to pass through my throat. Her image, her eyes, her touch, her presence, everything hammered in my mind like a memory that didn't belong to me, but now lived there. It was as if I'd absorbed part of her pain, as if she'd left something with me. I can't explain it, but I know I didn't leave alone. I took something with me, or she left a part of herself in me. In the days that followed, I tried to feign normalcy. I drank more coffee than I should have. I smoked until my mouth tasted bitter. I slept badly, very badly. Nightmares that weren't exactly dreams, but replays, flashes, fragments of that night. The rain, the curve, the voice, that plea, "Help me," and I would wake in a cold sweat, my heart racing, as if I were returning from a place I shouldn't have gone. Sometimes I thought she was in the corner of the room. Sometimes I could smell her on my uniform. Other times the radio would hiss out of nowhere, even though it was off. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? How could I explain something I didn't even understand? How could I put into words something that touches on what we spend our entire lives pretending not to feel? It wasn't fear of the supernatural. It was fear of myself, fear of what it awakened, fear of realizing that perhaps I had never been as strong as I thought, that the uniform was just armor to hide all the things I could never face. I started avoiding conversations. I became more withdrawn than I already was. My colleagues would ask if I was okay, but I'd smile and say it was just fatigue. As always, only this time it was true. A fatigue that wasn't physical. It was of the soul. The exhaustion of someone who's seen too much and can't go back. I started returning to the curve on my days off, without telling anyone, just to stand there, staring, waiting perhaps for it to appear again, or trying to understand if all that had really happened. But she didn't come back, and the silence was worse now, a silence full of questions, full of memories that repeated themselves with surgical precision. It was as if the road was laughing at me, as if it knew I was just another one of those who said, "I don't believe any of this." Until I felt it, until I saw it, until I heard it, until I held the hand of someone who shouldn't be here anymore. I began to study the place more closely, searching through old archives, combing through accident reports, missing persons records, obsessively, as if a part of me knew her story was still hidden somewhere, and now it was up to me to find it. And in the process, I lost myself. I withdrew from everything. I isolated myself. I began talking to myself, sleeping with the light on. Her, a face, in my thoughts wouldn't leave me. She followed me like a shadow, and the more I tried to forget, the more present she became. But the worst wasn't remembering. It was the constant doubt, the question that repeated itself over and over, day and night. Why me? Why did she choose me? Why did I listen? Why did she show up that night? Was it a coincidence, a punishment, a chance, or just another trap? And then, on one of those days of silent vigil, leaning against the hood of the police car, staring into the dense brush around the bend, I realized I wasn't trying to forget anymore. I wanted more. I wanted to understand. I wanted to see again, to know what was missing, to know what she couldn't say. The road pulled me in, and I let it. Her pain became mine. Her truth became the only thing that still made sense to me, and the only certainty I had was that it wasn't over yet. I told myself it would be the last time, that it was just to end it, to get it out of my head. But I already knew that was a lie. There was no longer a line between what was work and what was compulsion. The curve called to me like a magnet to metal, and I no longer had the will to resist. Every attempt to move forward felt forced. The conversations with colleagues, the coffees at the gas station, the meaningless rounds, everything was a backdrop for one thing: going back there, go back to her. I went on a moonless night, silent, windless. The road seemed narrower, darker than before, as if it knew I was coming. I took the police car but parked far away. I turned off the headlights, turned off the engine. I wanted to walk the last stretch on foot, in silence, like someone entering a sacred place. Each step made the gravel crunch. The tall grass nearby moved gently as if breathing. The sky was overcast. No stars, not a single firefly. I reached the exact spot where the first apparition had first appeared. I stopped. I stood, hands in my pockets, listening to my own heartbeat. For a few minutes, nothing. No sound, no voice, no sign, just me and the darkness. And it was in this complete silence that it all began again. First was the smell, jasmine, wet, alive, strong. Then the air. It became dense, hot. Not like heat, but like when you walk into a room someone just left. That suspended energy, inexplicable. My body reacted before my mind. The chill rose like a wave. And then I saw it. This time, it wasn't her. It was something different. A shadow, tall, standing on the other side of the road. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It just watched. I froze. My feet stuck to the ground like wet cement. I tried to use the flashlight, but the light failed, almost as if it had been drained. I could only make out the outline, broad shoulders, head down, arms at my sides, a heavy presence, intense, the opposite of what I felt with her. And that's when I realized something terrible. This wasn't just any manifestation. It was another kind of energy, older, darker, and yet connected to her, as if he were there to stop her, as if he were part of what kept her trapped. The figure didn't come closer. It didn't need to. Its presence filled everything, and even in the darkness I knew it was watching me, studying me, and I felt something deeper than fear. It was revolt. That presence didn't want help. It wanted silence, oblivion. It was the denial of truth. And it was there, standing between that shadow and the place where it appeared, that everything inside me transformed, because it was no longer about the supernatural. It was no longer about a woman asking for help. It was about a conflict, an invisible struggle between memory and oblivion, between what deserves to be remembered and what prefers to remain hidden. The shadow vanished as if it had never been there. It evaporated without sound, without brightness, without wind, and as soon as it was gone, the scent of jasmine returned, stronger, as if it were a sign, a breath of presence saying, "You saw," and in that instant, even without any image, without any words, I knew she was still there. And now, It wasn't just her anymore. There was something else on the road, something that doesn't want the truth to come out. After that night, I stopped denying it. I stopped rationalizing, searching for technical explanations, telling myself it was just fatigue. This was real. All of it was. The woman, the curve, the necklace, the cry for help. And now, that dark presence that seemed to watch her every attempt to break free. I felt like I had crossed an invisible line, a line that once crossed allows no return. But the most disturbing thing was the realization that perhaps I had never had a choice. The scent of jasmine began to follow me, not just in my memories. I could smell it in my car, in the closet where I hung my uniform, sometimes on my own pillow, even after days without hitting the road, as if it were leaving traces, as if I'd marked my routine with its presence. And even that, instead of frightening, made me feel responsible, connected, separate. It wasn't just an apparition anymore, it was a bond, and not the light, fluid kind that comes and goes. It was an old bond, aching, as if something between us had once existed, and now, finally, was trying to resurface. I began to dream about her, dreams that weren't dreams. They were experiences. I saw them through her eyes, the car spinning, the sound of the crushed metal, the water running down the windows, her breath growing shallow, the cold, the panic, the lack of help. She saw the world falling apart, and all she could do was wait for someone to come. But no one did, and in those dreams, I was there, not as help, but as a shadow, like a distant figure, indecisive, hesitant, like someone who for some reason was once close and failed. When I woke, bathed in sweat, my chest heaving, an unbearable feeling overcame me. Guilt, not the logical, concrete. Guilt with a beginning, middle, and end, but an ancient, emotional guilt, one that can't be explained with facts. Something that comes from within, like a whisper you've tried to stifle for years, and now screams. I started researching more. I combed through old reports. I requested access to files I shouldn't have. I falsified the reason for my inquiry just to read about decades-old incidents. I searched for names, photos, any record of a missing woman in the area. And then I found it. An accident. A name, a car that was never found, a filed police report, and a coincidence that took my breath away. The date. It was the day of my first shift. The day I was supposed to be on that stretch of road. But I was displaced by a colleague. The same shift that, due to logistical error or luck or curse, I didn't fulfill. And she disappeared that night. It was like a blade cutting through me. I understood. She hadn't chosen me by chance. That voice hadn't come by accident. It was a cycle, a link that was never closed. And in some way I didn't yet understand, I was part of it. As if, the moment she left, something of me had also been trapped in that curve. And now, everything was trying to come back together. Not out of justice, but out of necessity. She didn't just want to be remembered, she wanted to be heard. She wanted someone who saw what no one else saw, who felt what no one else dared to feel, and maybe, who carried what she couldn't. I turned back around the bend. For the last time, or so I thought. I took the necklace with me. I buried my feet in the same ground where I'd first seen her. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, waiting. And the wind began to blow, this time with sound. A whisper, disjointed phrases, overlapping voices, as if she were no longer alone, as if there were others. And then a cooler breeze blew across my face, and I heard, clear, firm, deep, "Now you see." It was the last sign. I don't know if that was a farewell or an invitation. I only know that in that moment, everything inside me fell silent. For the first time since that early morning, I felt peace, not as relief, but as surrender. I had understood what I needed to understand, what she needed me to understand. But something was still missing, because even after that final whisper, I continued to stand there, with the feeling that one last secret was still buried. What I did after that night wasn't planned. It was instinctive. It was like following an old scent, a trail in the dark, a whisper no one else heard. I returned to the road, without a uniform, without a radio, without a patrol car. I returned as a man, as a living memory, and I took with me what remained of the courage or the obsession that had kept me going until then. I arrived at the bend just before dawn. The sky was still dark, but with a grey hue beginning to spread, as if time itself hesitated to illuminate that place. The ground was wet, even without rain, and the grass seemed to breathe, as if hiding something, as if holding the truth with claws of roots, earth, and silence. I walked down the hill slowly. I passed places I had searched so many times before, but this time I went further, deeper, not guided by reason, but by a strange, almost physical certainty that I was being led, not alone. Her presence was still there, not visible, but clear, like a warmth on my back, like a living memory guiding me. And then I saw. It took a few seconds for my eyes to grasp what they were seeing. The earth had sunk. A shallow crater obscured by weeds and dry leaves revealed fragments, rust, plastic, fabric, and deeper, a deformed metal structure covered in mud. It was a car, or what was left of it, and inside, the pale glow of something time had failed to erase. There she was, or what's left of it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just knelt. The necklace I was carrying began to tremble in my hand slightly, as if in recognition, as if I had finally come home. And I understood. All of it. The whispers, the radio, the dreams, the curve, was her leading me back to the place where she had been forgotten, where the whole world passed by and didn't look, where no one ever dug, where her end never had closure. I called dispatch, but I didn't tell them everything. I just said the basics. I found a car, probably missing, needs forensics. The voice on the other end responded with an automatic understood, as if it were just another piece of protocol. But I knew this wasn't just a closed case. It was a life that, for some reason, could only be found by me. The days that followed were a blur of reports, strange looks and bureaucratic questions. But what no one knew was that the real report was already with me, not on paper, but in my soul. Her name was back in the records. Her family was located. A sister, her only living relative, was the one who recognized her from a detail on the pendant, the same sister who hugged me silently, as if she knew there was something bigger to the story that would never be explained. And even with everything written down on paper, nothing is finished inside me. I still return to the curve sometimes. I just pass slowly. I don't go down anymore, but I hear the radio hissing softly, like an echo that refuses to die. Sometimes I smell jasmine. Sometimes I smell nothing. But every time I pass by, I remember that there are things that don't want to be forgotten, and others that can't be, because deep down I know I was called there for a reason, not to save, but to remember. If this story sent a shiver down your spine, then you're among the few who can see what most prefer to ignore. Stories like these aren't just tales. They touch something deep inside us that stays with us. And if it's kept you hooked, it's because you have something in common with us. A thirst for hidden truths, for mysteries no one dares to tell. The next video is already on screen, and I can assure you, what awaits you there goes even deeper, darker, more disturbing. A story that not only surprises, but changes the way you see everything around you. So keep going, see it through to the end. You'll understand why. And now you can do something simple but powerful, like subscribe and write the word here in the comments curve. Only those who have come this far will understand. This shows that you're with us on this journey, and you'll help others find these stories that need to be told. See you in the next video, and be careful what you listen to on the radio at night.